Today's guest spent more than 20 years on the corporate side of marketing, watching agencies do everything wrong and making a mental list every time of things that happened that he would fix when he got the chance. He finally got the chance. He walked away from a career where he was the decision maker, and he built his own agency from scratch. Not to do what everybody else is out there doing, to do it different. His company is called Cyberdogz, and it's a non-traditional branding and creative agency based in Minnesota that runs on all contractor model, a relationship first philosophy. Mike Brevik, welcome to Process Over Pressure. Welcome back to Process Over Pressure. I'm Chad Parrish, your host, and I'm excited about today's guest. Today's guest spent more than 20 years on the corporate side of marketing, watching agencies do everything wrong and making a mental list every time of things that happened that he would fix when he got the chance. He finally got the chance. He walked away from a career where he was the decision maker. He was the guy cutting the checks and managing agency relationships. And he built his own agency from scratch. Not to do what everybody else is out there doing, to do it differently, to do it the way it should have been done a long time ago. His company is called Cyberdogz, and it's a non-traditional branding and creative agency based in Minnesota that runs on all contractor model, a relationship first philosophy, a zero tolerance for the bait and switch playbook that's out there. He is also the host of Brand Retro, a podcast about psychology behind brands that build loyal followings. He calls himself, I love this, the Chief Marketing Officer. I'm going to let that one speak for itself. Mike Brevik, welcome to Process Over Pressure.
Hey, Chad. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's so exciting to have you. I know we had our pre-talk and getting a chance to know each other. And I was kind of looking forward to this. I had this one kind of pegged as one that would be fun to do. So I'm really looking forward to having you on. And I guess, as we start this show and like I always do, I think it's important to know who Mike is. I kind of gave a little intro there, but maybe I missed something. Tell us who we're talking to today and what makes you get out of the bed every day to be the Chief Marketing Officer.
Yeah. My name is Mike Brevik. I am from, West Central Minnesota. I grew up in a very small town. I was always kind of into art and I was kind of drawing, painting, those kinds of things. I ended up going to school to be an illustrator, and which then turned into graphic design, which is kind of how I got my start working for a small agency in South Texas. And from there, it went from small agency to printing company to corporate retail. And 20 some years later, a lot of lessons learned, a lot of experiences, a lot of, seeing different parts of the business and experiencing it from different, places within the company. I decided to start my own thing. And it wasn't that I was burnt out or it wasn't some kind of a revolt to corporate life or anything like that. I wanted to get back to doing things that filled my cup. I wanted to get back to creativity and I wanted to, kind of have fun again in the job and not just punch that clock every day. So when I started Cyberdogz, you'd already kind of alluded to it, but I kind of took all those lessons and the different things that I saw, not necessarily knowing if they were right, wrong, or otherwise, but I kind of created a culture that here's how I would do it if I was to build my own agency. And, as a result, it's very contrasting to the traditional agency of how things are run, but I kind of like that. And once I kind of realized that, I leaned into that and we've kind of made that our mission and our model is that, there's a lot of different ways to do business and it doesn't always have to be, this monkey see, monkey do type environment.
Yeah, I really love that. And, I think things that we go through and experience, myself being a former executive, and you see things, right? You experience things and the old saying is everybody's like, well, if I was in charge, I would do it this way. You hear that all the time. And even people that may be under you, well, if I had the opportunity, I'd do it this way. But you kind of take mental note of those things because there are some things that as an executive, your hands are tied. You'd like to do things differently, but you just can't do it. And you work for somebody else and you want to go, if you will listen to me, this will be better. But reality is you just can't do that. And so I think, for myself and you, I think one thing that's rewarding for both of us is that we're actually getting to put, this into practice. And when we talk to our clients or we're involved with them, we get to look at those pitfalls. We're actually on the place where they actually listen to us now, and they're like, "Well, you tell me what to do," and so it's kind of fun.
Yeah. And in the inverse to that, when you're in the corporate world or you're working for a big company, you also have the protection of that company, and you're able to make some mistakes without feeling it in your checkbook, kind of a thing. And there's something about, not having a net to fall on that is fun as well. So yes, I get to make a lot of my own decisions and drive my own fate and whatnot, but man, I need to be careful. I need to pay attention. I need to be calculating, and I like that part of it too. And sure, I've made plenty of mistakes, but I've also got an opportunity to redeem myself in those scenarios because I have that control.
And I think that's important, right? Like we have to self reflect. And you're right. And I'm not against corporate America by any means. I don't want that to come across. I love my time in the companies that I work for, and I work for some really great companies, and I enjoyed it, and I learned a lot. Right? It's just a different working environment, and that's okay, and that's for somebody. For me, I think one of the things that kind of allude to what you're saying is that when you get your own, it's your own gig, it's your own deal. You get a chance to, you better go into it with a mindset. And I tell people all the time when I talk to them, like, you better be humble. Like owning your own business, if you're not humble, you won't last very long. And you got to be willing to look yourself in the mirror and go, "Hey, I screwed that up. Like that stunk." And self reflect and adjust and adapt. And because we don't have a safety net. If I don't do it and my company doesn't make any money, I don't eat. And that's the reality.
Yeah. And I mean, to be honest, especially when you're starting out, every customer you have and every opportunity you have to hit a home run is a bridge to the next one. So if you treat any customer in an insignificant way, or if you feel like, they're not my biggest customer, if you try to segment them in a way that is not positioning them as the most important thing, then you're kind of setting off on the wrong foot, because that's how I got here. I mean, 10 years later, I can tell you that doing good work in my first 2 weeks is what bought me another month. And doing good work in my first month is what bought me 6 months. And so on and so it goes. And 10 years later, it's like, I'm glad I cared. Because if
Yeah.
I had ego in that process, or if I felt like, for some reason the client just didn't get it, I don't know that I'd be here, honestly. And there are times, I mean, don't get me wrong, you got to swallow your pride. That's part of it. But so what? You had to do that at a corporate job too. You had to pick your battles, and you had to know when to fight, and you had to know when to stand up for something. And sometimes you just needed to know when to do what you're told. And it's the same in owning a business.
Yeah, and that's why I love having this conversation with you because, I'm new. I'm not new to this business. I'm new to this owning my own company, like starting it. And you've been doing it now for a while. And so what you said really resonates with me is like in the beginning, like I would say I'm in the beginning stages of this company and owning it. And you look at every opportunity as a blessing, and it is. I mean, I truly and I hope I never want to lose that. Like I think that's someone who entrusts me to work with them and to help them. Like to me, that's and this is gonna sound crazy. It's better than the money that I make from the work. Like just the fact that they trust me to say I want you to help me is the part that I think I get more feelings out of that than I do like the paycheck at the end of it. You know what I mean? And I don't ever want to lose that. Like I never want to lose that. I think that's so important.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this to a lot of people, and for those who get it, they get it. For those who don't, I kind of get that head turning like, what? But I've never done it for the money, and I don't think that's something you should focus on. I think you should focus on the work, you should focus on the opportunities, and you should focus on just how do I keep, from a business perspective, how do I keep myself busy 40, 50 hours a week? The money will take care of itself. The money, the word of mouth, the credibility, all those different things that you kind of feel like you might need to manufacture that part, that'll all take care of itself if you just focus on the work and delivering a good result. And it's huge. You don't really know that until you kind of live through it, but it does. It absolutely growth, the whole thing. It all just kind of shows up. I mean, you can be intentional with it and whatnot. I'm not saying that's not part of it, but it's not, it's a very small component of the whole picture. And, quick story for you. Like I went into this whole thing pretty prepared. I mean, I thought I'm ready to go. I'm doing this. I had some money saved up and I kind of had my whole thing mapped out. And the first day I woke up, I always say this, but unemployed or self-employed, however you want to look at it was a weird day because I got up like I always do. And I'm like, I don't have to be anywhere. I don't need to, like, what am I going to do all day? And I
Yeah.
had a few clients going into it. So, I mean, I kind of had stuff to do, but I also knew that those weren't enough. So I had to kind of manufacture ways to, well, I need a sales pipeline. What does that look like? So I joined some networking groups. I need some business and some operations systems. So I guess I'll start working on that. So I just started to kind of manufacture things to fill the time. And structurally, it just kind of started to develop around me. And then that's just kind of how I got started. But it's a very strange feeling on that first day when you wait, when you're used to punching that clock or, going to that corporate job every day. It's a weird feeling the first day you wake up and you don't need to be anywhere.
I was sitting here laughing. You probably saw me. I was thinking, like, I do this every morning. It's kind of funny because it's just me, right? Like, I'm so used to having a staff and so used to going in and so I fix my, I have my office here in my home, and I fix my cup of coffee, and I walk in and I say, "Well, good morning, staff." And there's nobody here but me, but I start my morning every morning the same way, and I kind of laugh to myself a little bit about that, and but I actually I think there's a lot of story in that because I know while today that it's a staff of me, it won't always be that way. And I want to start, I wanted to start my business the same way that I would end it, whether it be the single me or it's 20 years when there's 200 people working for me. I'm just throwing that number out there. But I wanted to start my day the same way. And I've been very, very mindful of that. And I was asked this question, and I think you will relate to this is what's the most enjoyable part of what you do now? And I will tell you that it's actually helping people and seeing results from giving them some tools and resources to help their business. Like I get more enjoyment out of them calling and saying, "Man, I'm really seeing the progress. I'm really seeing that." And that to me, that's my motivation. That's what motivates me to get up and do it every single day.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's creating dependency out of thin air. I've made myself valuable to people just from building a relationship and delivering some kind of a product or a result or whatever it is. And there wasn't an ad in the paper for an open position. There wasn't a definition of role. There was no box I needed to fit into to make myself relevant in that scenario. It was a blank canvas that maybe started over a cup of coffee that turned into a quick project that turned into, could you help me with this? And in some ways there was an exchange with no strings attached, just trying to be nice, trying to be a good dude. I don't want to say the word free, but you're putting yourself out there in a way to just help somebody out and within the right parameters and the criteria in which you're trying to build that business, it just develops into something. And yeah, that's probably the best part. I mean, I like marketing and these different things, but for me, it's people are depending on me, whether it's my team or my clients or whatever, but it's a crazy idea because you don't know where you're going to be 10 years from now.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a journey, right? And I say this to people listening, any entrepreneur, and whether it be a consulting or not a consulting or a market agency or I don't care what it is. I mean, I have lawyers, I have doctors, I have you name it on my show, and it's the same. It's one thing is always the same is that being an entrepreneur is not always knowing the right answer, but it's willing to grow and develop and find the right answer. What I have feel and have seen is that the entrepreneurs that do very well are those that are willing to be humble and they're willing and being humble means you got to ask for help sometimes when you don't know and be willing to be reflective, like really be reflective on what works and doesn't work and be able to adapt to that. And I know there's a lot of things that would go into that, but those two things are pretty consistent with people who've been successful.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are companies out there that are looking for more of a, you know, they don't know what they're looking for. So they're looking for more of a traditional agency type service. They want to jump through the hoops. And then once I think they've done that enough times and they've kind of looked at the ROI or they've, maybe been led towards something that maybe didn't benefit their business in some way. I think once they're reflecting on that and they're looking at that and thinking, well, what's the point then? Either they completely get a bad taste in their mouth and they give up on the process or whatever it is, or they go seeking the alternative, which is more of a human process. It's more transparent. It's more humble. It's more collaboration based, all those things. And that's exactly right. Like, I think there's success out there for all different kinds, but the ones I see that actually sustain and that can kind of weather the storm and suffer through hard times, they're the ones who have focused on relationship and providing something. I say quality, but it's more of a humanity and a quality mix than it is just, a result. I would say, even for my own clients, I think we do a great job. I think we deliver a lot of good results, but man, we get a lot of grace when we make mistakes too. And that's because of the relationship. It's because of the loyalty and the commitment and kind of how we've positioned ourselves with these clients. And by no means are we perfect, and neither are the clients, but that was part of the thing I wanted to get away from when I started this whole thing. Is I didn't want it to be based on solely numbers and transactions and what we can do for each other. Because if that's all it is, if it's all bundled up in an exchange, it's a soulless existence, and there's nothing saving you there. You're only as good as your last price model, which sucks.
So I want to press into something that I think you and I could talk about, and my hope is that people maybe listen and hear this and get it, because I think for a business owner, and I'm speaking about a business owner who owns a business, whether it's a small business, medium sized business, large business, whatever, right? Because you and I both have been on that side of it from the executive side. Very often what happens is let's use marketing for example, because that's what you do, and I've been on that side of hiring marketing people. You get the message, up top. Hey, we want to do more in our marketing, or we want to launch a new product, or we want to do all this. And so, usually typically starts with them knowing what they want to do, or what they're trying to do, and then you got to start putting together outside sources, marketing people to help kind of pitch that. Right. My experience is that very often you said it, and this is why I want to go there. It's a transaction only. And I want to lean into that, because I think what you said is so important, because I've been on it where I've hired people to do the marketing part for us, and you come in and it's all about what is the return? What is return? Because often the top of the pecking order at the top, they could care less of what you're doing with the fluffy ads and all that. They just want to know what the ROI is. What's the return? What are we doing to drive business and make money? That's what they want to know, right? And there's way more that goes into it than just that. And so, your approach, I think, is totally non-traditional than what's out there. And I just think it would be, something to talk about, is because for me, as a person who's formerly used to hire people, sitting at that business executive level and hiring people, it was always transactional. That's really all you could find. And I think what you're doing is so different. And that's why I want to talk about it, because that's not your approach. It's not transaction.
No, I'll give you an example. So like one of my last transactions, so to speak, in the corporate world was I was working with an agency that was preparing their annual contract. And they brought me the contract and they said, hey, would you mind taking a look at this before we propose it to the board or whatever? And I said, yeah, I can do that. So I looked at it and I instantly saw that they had given themselves quite a hefty increase from the previous year. So I went through the contract and I noticed where they added the different deliverables and components and whatnot. And I went back to that agency and I said, well, here's the thing. You're trying to go for the kill. I wouldn't. I said, what I would do is I would present it either where you were at last year or slightly, cost of living increase or whatever you want to do, slightly elevated. And then I would put in there some optionals in there. And I said, you already have the pulse on the business. We're going to add things. You're going to get to that number, but you're going to get there almost passively or by their decision, not you trying to strong arm the number. And of course their position was, yeah, but it's a fixed thing. And they wanted to go for the kill right out of the gate. And I was like, oh, whatever, it's your business. So sure enough, they made the presentation, which I didn't know. The company was looking at other agencies at the time, and I was not in on those conversations. So within a week's time, I was brought into a meeting, sat down with the figurehead, so to speak, and we walked through the 4 or 5 different proposals that were thrown in front of us. And guess who's the highest was? Had they left it alone, had they come at it a little bit more strategically and looked at it from let's get a little bit at a time to get to our goal and not necessarily go for the big number up front, they would have still been there.
Yeah.
And, it's one client, whatever. And I'm not saying that happens all the time, but in that instance, I learned a lesson there. It's like, if my goal is to get to $1 million, what's the difference if I get it 100 grand at a time or I get $1 million up front? I mean, $1 million up front sounds cooler. I get that, but you got to think strategically. You got to think long term, because $1 million up front buys me a really hefty payout up front. And then I got to decide how to stretch the million. Where if you give me $100,000 for the next 10 months or whatever, I've got security for 10 months.
Yeah.
I got a checks and balance. I've got boundaries. I got a ceiling. I've got a basement. I know what I need to manage or survive on until I find that next project, next client, whatever it is. But the end result's the same. So for me, it's more of a patient, like, let's buy ourselves 10 months worth of road to build a relationship and find ways to layer in those next projects or that next wave of, contract or project, whatever it is, versus putting ourselves out there in one lump sum and then hoping we measure up to it. And in this case, that's what they looked at. They said, okay, we were happy with their output. We were happy with what we were getting from them at that rate. But now they're trying to wrench us for another 200 grand. There ain't worth that. Whether they were or weren't, I don't know. That's debatable. But the way it was presented within that context and lined up against 4 other presentations that were maybe better or cheaper, they made themselves vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's same thing. I see that all the time. And another thing is, it's the deliverables, right? I mean, very often I talk to business leaders and the CEOs and founders, and for them, it's all about the deliverables, about what you're accomplishing for them. And I think one of the things that I took from that I try to do is a very detailed of expectations. What is it that I'm going to do? Because this happens a lot, right? You start with a client and you have a discovery call and they tell you, okay, well, I need you to do X, Y, and Z, and you scope that and you give it to them. But they're especially, you see that a lot in other entrepreneurs, is where their minds are always racing. And so before you know it, they're coming to you and go, hey, what about this? What about this? What about this? And the scope grows, and it's end up like you kind of have to. And I think if more people took the approach like you do, with like, you kind of alluded to it, like getting all your money up front and then being under this whole umbrella of like, this is what you're going to do. And then everything kind of comes to you, rather than building that relationship together. Like, here's a deliverable that you need. I'm going to deliver it to you, and you be satisfied with it. And then we go the next month and the next month and the next month. And then if we need to rescope things, but we only can do what we can do within that time frame. And you got to be able, as what we do, to articulate that so that business owners or CEOs are looking at it saying, okay, Cyber said they were going to do this, this, this. They fixed that problem. Like, there is no deniability. You can't say, well, I don't know what I'm getting from them. I've been on that side where I'm like, I don't even know what we're paying for because I don't even get anything. Like that, there's a lot of them that do that. They're out there.
Well, and to be fair, sometimes what happens is I think the client, I don't know what I'm getting from them because they've bowled over the top of me with so much information. I don't even know what I'm looking at. And that's not necessarily a flaw on the agency. It's the flaw in the approach of how they set themselves up to be measured. And I see that happen a lot where they overcomplicated it. Yes, they successfully convinced the client to pay them whatever they wanted, but you also set yourself up to fail because even though the client can't articulate the expectations because it was over their head, they know it's a lot because they paid a lot. So then when they go back and sit in their office and think, I don't even know what they're doing, that's not a good start.
No.
So you have to be able to, list out and explain those expectations and those milestones, but you got to do it in a way that's mentally digestible so that they can equate it to value. If they can't equate it to value, you're screwed. Like, don't do that. And I see it all the time. And I've experienced it too. And I've made the mistake. So it's not like I'm just judging everybody else,
No.
but it's happened and it's a dance. You have to, just because you throw it in the PDF and I emailed it to you, that is not going to get you out of it. Because if the client doesn't understand what they're reading, or if it's too much to absorb, it doesn't matter. Contractually, yeah, I guess you're covered, but that's not the goal. The goal is I want the client to value me.
Exactly. And that's the point that it kind of back to what I was making is that it is as a business owner that's out there. And I'm sure there's people that are listening that are like, yeah, I've experienced that where, I've engaged with someone and we paid them, 100 grand or 150 grand. At the end of it, I don't even know what it does. I mean, that is common. That is very common out
It is, and sometimes they made a, they might have been sold a bill of goods, but sometimes maybe that agency did everything they said they do, but the client, I don't know what good looks like, so I can't tell them it was worth it. And it's like that sucks for the agency because you're giving that potential client or that customer a perception that you don't want out there. So how you deliver it, how you articulate it, and how you control that narrative, it's a huge part of it.
Yeah, I mean, because that's our job, right? Is to deliver improvement. It's the reason they're coming to you or they're coming to me is because they need improvement. That they recognize that they need something, and it's very common that a lot of what happens is where they just start hiring people. I mean, this is common too. Like they just we'll hire. I know a client that I worked with in the past where we'll just hire a marketing director and maybe 2 or 3 people to work for them, and they do that, right? And then they're not from that mindset. They're not from the marketing side of things. So to them, when you try to go to interview a marketing director, you have a list of questions that you created in your interview, but it doesn't do what the business needs it to do, or it's not the right questions, or it's not the right fit. And then you start just throwing money out the window because you've hired this group and you want them to go do it, or hire this person. Maybe you brought them in house rather than sitting down with somebody like yourself and saying, Hey, Mike, here's where we want to go. What would be your way of doing that? And let it kind of scope through that so people can physically read it and understand, because not every business owner is a great marketer and not every business owner is a great salesperson. You have strengths and you have weaknesses, and you've got to find that group or that people. Maybe it's a group, maybe it's individually. I mean, oftentimes I've said, hey, look, I'll go, let me work with you and help build what it is you need. And then we can start hiring people, because if you don't have the process first, just go and hire people, you're just throwing money away.
But if you don't even know what you're trying to do,
Yeah.
like, I mean, to me, it's funny because the answer's in the title. We're going to go hire a marketing director. Okay, we'll break that down. You're trying to find somebody that can direct marketing, correct? That's really what you're looking for.
That's
But
right.
most situations are, I want to hire a marketing director that can build websites, that can write copy, that can do social media, that can graphic design, that can, like, I want them to carry every skill set that lives inside of a marketing company. That's not a marketing director. You're looking for a unicorn, and that's not real. So you need to figure out what it is. We really need social media. Then find a social media manager, or, hire somebody that fills the skill set. And if they have fringe, like they're also a graphic artist, or like, fine, that's not that crazy, or that's not that unrealistic to come across. But when people hire a marketing director and they expect them to check every box in the marketing spectrum, it's ridiculous. It's not going to happen. Or if it does happen, it's not going to garnish good results, put it that way.
No, but I mean, I know for you, you've sat down with those business owners, and look, I want to be very clear. It's not just small business owners that deal with this. This is prevalent all through it. And you sit down with them, and that's the uncovering part where you start really peeling back the onion and saying layers of the onion and going, yeah, this is the whole thing is set up. And that's why I'm an advocate for having people like yourself or just to come in and tell me what I need, because I don't know what I need. On the other side of that, the reason that doesn't happen as much as it should be is that nobody who owns a business, if you're out there and you own a business right now, no one's raising their hand going, hey, I think I have problems. Like, nobody wants to do that, right? Like I don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. That's a reality. And when you start saying, hey, I want to bring somebody in to look, you have to, you in your mindset are you have convinced yourself that you're not good enough to run this, that you got to have some help. And that is a normal feeling and thinking that happens, but it's not accurate. That's like that little devil telling you a bunch of stuff. You have to ask for help, and it's okay. That's what makes business grow, is being able to have expertise in certain things that someone may be good at to help with them with some insight. That's not weakness. That's actually showing strength.
I would say even more so than that, it's understanding the value of your own time. Like I meet a lot of business owners and a lot of clients, that either went through a phase or are still in the phase where they think it's cheaper and easier to do all the work themselves. And it's like, well, then you don't understand the value of your own time. Because if you're if you're running a business, you should have a rough understanding as to what your time is worth. If you make, if you make $10,000 a month, you should be able to run the math backwards and go, I'm good for about $100 an hour or whatever that number is. So then the question is, how much would it cost me to hire a social media manager? Is that more or less than $100 an hour? Well, it's probably less. Then why are you doing it? Because if you can go out and produce $100 an hour, like accurately and consistently, that's where you need to be focused, not sitting there trying to learn the nuances of Facebook and Instagram and all these different things. But a lot of people do it and they just can't get over that idea of the fact that it's cheaper and easier to do it themselves. And it's like, but it's not, because it's costing every day you do that, it's costing you money and it's delaying the growth of your business by not focusing on the things you should be focusing on. So then the inverse of that is when people say, well, I can't afford to hire somebody out of the gate. And it's like, well, then you need to lower your expectations or find a way to invest in your brand, borrow from yourself and put those wheels in motion, because this chicken and the egg thing you're doing where you're managing your own stuff, or, it doesn't even have to be social media. It could be, it could be any task. It could be taxes or bookkeeping or whatever. But every day you spend working on those things, and instead of growing your business, it prolongs the process. You'll never be able to afford it.
Yeah. And man, I mean, that you couldn't have said it better myself. And that's a very tough challenge, because you're looking at, well, and this is very common. And as we close, I'd like to kind of end on this, is everything's looked through a monetary lens, dollar, right? We talk a lot about dollar, where you can't see the results from having that person who's good at it and giving the time back. Like when you start talking about your time, that's not something that you can see day to day. But if you'll write it down, I always tell people, write down what you do in a day. And I think this is a great exercise for any business owner out there. Write down what you do in a day and do that for 1 week. And at the end of that week, I want you to look at where you spent most of your time at, and ask yourself, if I did this is, let's say that 90% of your time was spent in the operational side of it, then you might need to get an operational person, because if that's not something unless you're really good at it, but if you're not really good at it, give that to somebody else so you can be really good. Maybe sales is what you're really good at, or maybe the marketing part's what you're really good at. That's where 90% of your time should be. Do what you're good at and let somebody else do what is not as good, is costing you all your time.
So,
yeah. Well, Mike, it has been this has been great. What a pleasure. And for people out there, look, that are looking for a non-traditional, somebody who's been on the corporate side, understands the language, who's could give some insight and give some, opportunity for people to see maybe a little bit different approach than what's out there. How do they get in touch with you?
you could check us out at cyberdogsmarketing.com or find me on Mike Brevik. I'm on LinkedIn. We're kind of all over the socials. So any place you can find me there, that'd be great.
And who do you work with? If someone was asking, like, does he do small business? Does he do large business? What's your favorite, or what's your area of expertise?
I mean, I would say we do a lot with small to medium sized businesses, but then just through my, previous life, we've got connections where we've done projects for bigger companies like Janus Motorcycles or Milwaukee Tool. We've done things in and around the entertainment industry, the comic book industry. It's kind of a mixed bag, which is kind of fun. But we kind of go where the opportunity is, and we kind of go where, where the fun is. We kind of want to, like, I'm creative, so I like to just do things that fill my cup as well. But, we have certain niches we're stronger in, but at the same time, we're only stronger there because we've done more of them. it doesn't necessarily mean that the tactics differed. So
That's great. Well, Mike, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was a great, guys. Check him out, Cyberdogz. Also, he's got a podcast. I highly recommend Mike checking that out. I think is probably I kind of looked at a little bit fun and something that if you're looking for something a little bit different, it's fun. So he's was it Retro Brand Retro is the name of it, right?
yeah, the podcast name is Brand Retro. We talk a lot about marketing, a lot about business, and a lot about kind of the power of nostalgia and branding and all those fun things. So.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for being on today. I really have enjoyed it. Again, as always, this is Chad Paris with Process Over Pressure. You can check me out at stoneflyconsulting.com. Also, Stonefly Consulting, Process Over Pressure is the podcast on YouTube. Love for you to subscribe, join. More content will be coming out each and every day. So thank you for being on.
Thanks, Chad.